everyone! Alexa Donne here, and today I am going to be talking about Preptober for pantsers. I know it seems kind of like an oxymoron doing a video for pantsers about a month that's about prepping and planning, but I genuinely think that it is a good idea to do some planning of some sort for NaNoWriMo to set yourself up for success. That said, I am a person who has thrown myself into NaNoWriMo more than once with zero prep whatsoever, but I'm trying this year to be a bit more organized, so I thought this might be a really useful video to people like me who don't really outline, which tends to be a huge part of prep for people who do Preptober. To that end, some of the tips I'm going to give are going to be helpful to everyone, including our lovely planners out there, plotters, but the spirit of this video is to help my fellow pantsers with the little you can do in Preptober to lead to a better NaNoWriMo experience. So my first tip is to come up with some idea of what you're going to write, or multiple ideas that are options for you. You don't have to definitively decide ahead of time, and certainly you don't have to outline, but I think knowing something helps you get a really good jump start on the first couple days of Nano, and Nano is all about momentum, so do just enough planning to give yourself that jump start at the beginning. To that end, I find NaNoWriMo is a great time for pantsers to take back burner ideas, so ideas that have been percolating for a really long time, but don't necessarily certainly have an outline, but you have enough of a sense of kind of what you want to do with the story, maybe some of the characters, maybe an inciting incident, or a few scenes that you can use as breadcrumbs to launch yourself into it. So all of those times that I've done Nano with zero planning, I've jumped into writing an idea that's been percolating for more than a year usually. It's really important that whatever ideas you start to pin down for Nano have enough steam for 50,000 words. So this does mean knowing enough about whatever your concept and your idea is to know that it's a novel rather than a short story or a novella. Because what you don't want to do is to create filler conflict to hit a word count rather than real conflict that actually serves the story to hit word counts. Because the point of Nano isn't to end up with 50,000 words of gobbledygook, at least in my personal opinion. I think it should be pointed and purposeful writing, even if you're doing it on the fly. That's part of the fun for me. So that means your key thing for pinning down a few of those ideas is going to be meaningful conflict. Whatever idea that you have in mind, come up with at least 3 big things of conflict that you could feasibly put into the story. It doesn't even have to be ultra specific, because half the fun of pantsing is figuring it out on the day. But for example, I did Pants Brightly Burning, which is a retelling, so I certainly had enough of the grasp on the story, but 2 things I knew for sure I was going to be building conflict around were a central mystery and a central romance, and with those come tons of fun tropes that are full of conflict. Even though I decided on the specific ones as I was writing, I knew that the story certainly had enough to support 50,000 words of writing, and it actually had enough to support over 100,000 words of writing. That was a very long first draft. I kept going after Nano. So my second tip is to plan enough so that you have those first few days of Nano, you have enough material to get momentum. So this means you do have to do a little bit of planning, in my humble opinion. It means you gotta at least know who your main character is and who the POV is for that character, and I strongly advise knowing what your inciting incident is. Typically, those first 3 to 4 days of NaNoWriMo, you're going to be writing up to the inciting incident. I want to make the note that I know many people who do Preptober use workbooks to plan, and I just want to say to my fellow pantsers, you can use these if they work for you, because not all pantsers are the same. Discovery writing is a beautiful thing that has lots of differences, but workbooks make my heart start to beat a little bit too fast with panic, so those sorts of workbooks really aren't for me. So this is a case where you could do a bullet pointed list just to make sure you have roughed out 3 scenes that are going to get you to the inciting incident, and that's going to be your first few days, and then you can get into the groove and pants your way the rest of the way through. My third tip is getting your bare essentials of the story down. This will help you with tip number 2. And my first tip within tip 3 is to come up with a high-level pitch and or log line for your book. An elevator pitch, essentially. I find that essentially coming up with a marketing pitch tells me pretty clearly whether I have enough conflict and stakes baked into my idea to sustain it for a novel. And also, if I can come up with that elevator pitch, that log line, I know it's exciting enough to pants through it. I personally have to be very energized by a story in order to pants, and generally, whether you're an outliner or a pantser, you should be really energized by whatever idea you choose for Nano, because you're gonna get in the middle of Nano and start hating yourself and your story and everything. You have to do whatever it takes to maintain that thread of excitement. Tip 2 for your bare essentials is to figure out a few characters. As I mentioned, you should know at least your main character or your POV character, or multiple if you have more than one. It's also useful to figure out a love interest if you have one, or a primary friend, or a primary antagonist. It doesn't have to be super detailed. Again, character sheets, I get sweaty. It's not for me, but it might be for you. Who the character is, primary want, and some of the conflict you're going to throw in their way. And once you're developing the want and the conflict, you can figure out lots of other details. But honestly, so many character details, you can figure it out while you're doing Nano. Figuring out what they want is going to help you figure out your conflict and your stakes, which will help you figure out your inciting incident, which is that thing that I advise you to plan toward to get that first early momentum in Nano. The ideal inciting incident should say something about the character and have lots of interesting character-based conflict. That should help you come up with what those establishing scenes are, who your character is, and figure out what the inciting incident literally is. And my final tip for figuring out your story essentials before you start during Preptober is, if you can, figure out a big twist in the middle or your third act climax. I know not every pantser does this, but I do, and it really helps me. I consider this road mapping. This is discovery writing. Having the big twist in the middle or the climax already in mind, you're creating a roadmap. Writing is a roadmap. That's how I see it. You know where you're starting, so this is my advice. You're gonna plot out the first few stops you're gonna make on your road trip. What's nice about having the twist in the middle figured out or the third act climax is you have a better picture of how far on the map you're gonna go, and it'll help you plan your drive. I also think it helps with excitement. I get very excited about juicy twists, and that again helps me maintain momentum. Also, if you're writing a proper novel of a proper length, you might only get to the midpoint turn during NaNoWriMo. Depends how detailed you are writing during NaNoWriMo. I don't skip scenes and move forward. I write slowly but surely through a pretty clean draft. So NaNoWriMo, I only got to about the midpoint turn of Brightly Burning. So in essence, I kind of knew what I was writing the whole time. I didn't know the micro details, but I knew the main pit stops. All right, pantsers, my fourth tip, I mean this works for plotters too, you gotta collect your tools. If you're really stuck on the previous tips that involve specifically figuring out your story and you're breaking into hives and you're hyperventilating a little, the least you can do during Preptober is collecting your tools. The first thing I recommend is trying Scrivener. Unless it's totally changed, every year you should be able to do a free trial of Scrivener during NaNoWriMo. It only works during NaNoWriMo, but this is how I tried out Scrivener many, many years ago, and it's what sold me on the software. If you're not familiar with Scrivener, it's basically a tool for writers that helps you break up your novel into manageable chunks. It helps me visualize and organize things in a way that my chaotic brain really, really loves. Pantsers and plotters love Scrivener, but personally, it's like it was made for my pantsing brain. The smaller digestible chunks helps me feel way less overwhelmed by my book, and it's really important during Nano not to feel overwhelmed. It's also great because you can track your word counts. You can can set word count goals and track them, and that is invaluable during NaNoWriMo. The second tool to get set up is how you're going to track your word counts. So you can use Scrivener to track day to day, but I recommend creating a separate spreadsheet or using a planner in addition to tracking those word counts on the NaNoWriMo website. The reason for this is if you're like me and you forget to log in even one day of NaNoWriMo, you can't go back in and put those word counts, or at least that's how it used to be, and I would always fall behind and then my graph wouldn't look pretty. That annoyed me. So I also have started keeping a separate spreadsheet. This can actually be really, really fun if you're doing NaNoWriMo with a group of friends, because you can have a shared spreadsheet and you each track your word counts. That can be really, really fun. A little bit of competitiveness can actually really drive you in NaNoWriMo, but also I use my handy dandy planner. I mean, I use this when I write any project, not just during Nano, but I have a planner and I put my word counts every single day, and then I give myself stars for hitting word count goals. I have a whole video on that. I will link to it down below, but making sure you know how you're going to track your word counts ahead of time. If you need to order a planner or a calendar or just set up the spreadsheet, you're going to do that during Preptober. Third tool is going to be your beverages and snacks. Know what you like and what motivates you to write and gives you energy, and do a shopping trip before NaNoWriMo starts. I recommend picking something special, maybe that you don't always have or you want to try, to motivate yourself even more during Nano. Maybe it's, well, if you hit your word count goal 3 days in a row, you're gonna go get a pumpkin spice latte, or you're gonna drink the $20 bottle of wine. That just sounds so expensive, but whatever it is, or special, fancy coffee. Maybe there's fancy coffee that is grossly expensive, but you buy it for Nano. Or even it's that you're going to go to a special coffee shop to get the painfully overpriced coffee. But this can all be motivators for hitting your Nano goals. So plan ahead of time some of these beverage and snack related incentives, or just things to give you energy. Buy nuts if you're not allergic. Next, tool-wise, decide on your writing space. Just plan ahead of time, especially if you live with other people and you don't have a set writing space, or you do, but the people you live with just don't respect your time. Establish boundaries and guidelines. I mean, get a do not disturb thing for your door if you have an office, or just like prepare people ahead of time. I'm doing NaNoWriMo. It's really important to me during these blocked out times. I'm gonna write and you cannot bother me. Whatever prep you have to do to set up your writing space and your writing time, lay out those boundaries in October. I know it's especially hard if you are a working parent, because your kids love you and they want to bother you all the time. So I strongly recommend essentially creating like a quiet zone, like a time where your partner, if you have one, really picks up the slack so that you can get your writing done. I mean, this is just good advice anytime, but especially during Nano. And my last tool related tip is to create a playlist. Whatever idea you've decided on, I hope you figured out an idea, create a fun playlist. You can have one that's pop and one that is scores, whatever works, where you can basically create a tone poem almost, where like you're gonna turn it on and you'll be like, sweet, this is my playlist for my Nano project. It's gonna get you pumped, and as you listen to it throughout the month, it's like a Pavlov's dog response where you'll get into the writing when you put on the playlist or playlists. Okay, so the fifth tip for Preptober for everyone is to sign up on the NaNoWriMo website, which is a real duh, but like you might forget, sign up ahead of time, get ready. They're gonna ask you for a title for your project. Don't freak out, you can technically put untitled. Bookmark it. Maybe you'll be better than I am and actually remember to log in every day to update your word count progress. There are cabins you can join. So many tools on the NaNoWriMo website, so you should sign up before November 1st. And my sixth tip, honestly, for everyone is to find your NaNoWriMo support group. Honestly, it's gotten to the point where almost everyone I know does Nano every year, and that's a good thing. You are never short for other people who are doing Nano, whether you already have writer friends or not. If you don't, again, there are forums on the NaNoWriMo website. There are groups that you can join. You can just find people on Twitter who are hashtagging. Don't freak out, but there are in-person events too. I am a wuss, and I have never been to one, but I've heard they're great. And in fact, it turns out some of my writer friends run in-person Nano events. And I'm like, if you were here, I would be less afraid of going. But if you are a braver sort than I am, going to a NaNoWriMo event, there's almost always a kickoff event on November 1. Look on the NaNoWriMo website to see if there's a group in your area. Fantastic way to meet people who are also doing Nano and write with them. The idea of finding your NaNoWriMo supports, this is about motivation, support, and competition. Competition as motivation. These are the people that you can do word sprints with. These are the people you can do write-ins with if they're local, or not, you could do write-ins on Skype. These are the people that you can ping when you're stuck and they're going to give you a pep talk, or you're going to give them a pep talk because you're both in it at the same time and you're going to suffer together. And that is my last Preptober specific tip. All these things to do during October and the next few weeks to get yourself set up if you are a pantser or otherwise. But I will have an entire video of NaNoWriMo specific tips for actually doing the thing, which will be up in a few weeks. So admittedly, and maybe not surprisingly, as I already kind of confessed, I really don't do that much prep work during Preptober. So I'm curious what your top Preptober tips are. Share them down below in the comments. Let's help each other out, because I'm gonna try to prep. I haven't yet, but I have 2 weeks left. I can do it. Prepping is hard when you are a pantser or discovery writer, but we can do it. Give this video a thumbs up if you like it, and if you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. I post new videos 2 to 3 times a week. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, guys, happy writing and happy Preptober.